Hey painting friends, welcome to my art studio space. I am here today to introduce a new series of painting tutorials for you. I have received many requests from you guys for how to paint clouds slash like cloud painting tutorials, and that's a very broad subject matter, so I wanted to create not one tutorial but a series of maybe 5 to 10 different acrylic painting tutorials for how to paint different types of clouds. So this is going to be part 1 of that. So by the end of the series, I'm covering a lot of different types of clouds, so you should be better informed on how to paint lots of different types of clouds by the end of this series. Alright guys, for our materials today, I'm using a disposable paper palette. We're using heavy-bodied acrylic paints, primarily using this Golden brand, but I have a few different brands, so you're welcome to use whatever brand works best for you. For our colors today, we have Phthalo blue, Phthalo green, this is called flesh ochre, or if you have like an apricot color, that's pretty good, or like a Naples orange would also be great. This is cadmium yellow light, this is raw umber, this is violet, this is one of my more budget-friendly brands. If you have dioxizane purple, that might be even better than this one. This is raw sienna, titanium white, and ultramarine blue. I'm working on an 8-inch by 10-inch canvas panel today. I also have my Viva paper towels that I like to use, a cup of water for cleaning off the brushes. And for my brushes today, I have smaller brushes because we're working on a smaller canvas. You definitely want to have some type of a filbert brush like this guy. This was a flat tip brush when I first got it, and now it is kind of like a filbert frayed little guy. So if you have a brush like this is awesome. You don't want to have like a steady bristled flat tip brush. You want something that's got like a softer edge, but not too long of bristles. So if you have a round tip brush that's a little more stubbly like this, but still kind of soft, that's going to be great. This is one of the most important brushes in this tutorial. This is how we're going to get the soft puffy clouds. This is a flat tip brush, number 6 flat tip brush. This is a short and stubbier one, so this one's good for kind of pushing around that paint. I think I'm going to use this more for the clouds farther in the distance. And if you want to paint the horizon line, these clouds are going to be over the ocean, so this angled brush is going to be great for me getting a nice smooth horizon line in the painting. So you might not need this one. Keep this guy on standby unless you definitely want this for painting in a horizon line. Alright, let's get started with this tutorial. These are some of my favorite types of clouds to paint, especially a scene like this using this specific color palette. To get started, I'm going to put the other brushes aside. I'm going to start with that frayed. This was originally a number 4 flat tip brush, but now it's frayed and softer. I'm just going to dip that brush in the water, get a little bit of water on there, and just take a little bit of ultramarine blue and some white, just a teensy bit, and dip that brush in the water again so it's really thinned down. And even more white, I would say, because we don't want to make these too dark. We don't want our sketch to be too dark. So I'm going to start with just kind of very loosely outlining the shape of the clouds. So if you guys, as I'm teaching you, let's just put a little tick mark right there about where the center point is on this canvas, just so I can let you know where we're working on the canvas. So this general shape just went a little bit past center, and it's still staying pretty far up above halfway in this upper right quadrant. And the cloud's just gonna be a shape something like that. It's gonna get a little bit more white. My next cloud I'm gonna put like right under this cloud. It's a little bit of overlap. Still staying mostly in this upper quadrant. We have a little bit of an angle coming down. And the clouds that you are painting might be different than this layout. So if you want to completely follow this tutorial like exactly, you're welcome to do that. Or if you're just looking for some tips on painting these types of clouds, then you don't have to follow specifically what I'm doing here. This is basically just outlining where the clouds are going to go. Next, I'm going to put another cloud here that's kind of just like a angled, I think it's a rhomboid, I think, the shape. And we're going to do another cloud down here. It's going to kind of come up a little bit more of an angle, but still kind of flat. Just put a little bit more of a cloud there. And do another cloud right there. And as these clouds are going farther down on the canvas, they're pushing farther into the distance, so they're going to get smaller. Keep that in mind if you're painting clouds that aren't exactly like these. If you're painting like a mural or clouds on a poster, or you just want to learn how to paint clouds, as they are getting farther in the distance, we are perceiving them as if they are smaller because they're farther away. All right, I put one right there. I'm going to put another couple bunch of clouds in here. And in this particular scene that I'm painting, the cloud coverage gets heavier and thicker the farther out we go down here. And put another cloud like right there, another one under there. And we'll do another one right there. Just keep adding water while you're doing the sketch because you don't want to get too thick with your paint in this sketch. We're going to be covering up a lot of this, and we don't want to have any textured, sharp shape lines. And then down here, it's pretty much all cloud, like shadowy cloud color. And then I'm going to have my horizon line really low down here just so that for this tutorial purpose, I can focus mostly on painting the clouds. All right, so that's our general sketch. Now that that's done, we're going to put this brush away and we're going to switch to our larger filbert brush. And we're going to start by painting the color of the sky and kind of leaving the space in the clouds empty for now. We'll go back and do the clouds after we do the sky, which is behind the clouds. So starting off with the sky in this type of scene, this is like a mid-morning scene, is usually blue at the top and more green at the bottom. So you'll see me transition into that as we're working here. I'm going to start by getting some white and just going back and forth, getting both sides of the brush covered on the canvas. I'm going to take some blue. I had more white than blue. The blue is usually pretty strong, especially phthalo blue. And that is already going to be a little too dark. So I'm going to add more white. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine, just a little bit. And another thing to keep in mind if you're using acrylic paint is this color here is going to look darker when it's dry. Acrylic paint tends to dry just a little bit darker than it is when it's wet, so you might want to put a little bit more white in when you're mixing your colors so that you don't end up with something too dark on your canvas when it dries. All right, so I got that color there for the top of the sky. Now I'm just going to keep adding white to the same little spot. Just a little bit more phthalo blue there too. So you can see this color I put down here is lighter in value than that. So start with this line here and then just go back and forth with your brush, making your way up, getting both sides of the brush paint on the canvas. Can in general go up to the shape that you created. We're going to be painting over a lot of that later, so it's not a huge deal. We're going to add in more white, and now we're going to start to add a little bit of green. My phthalo green, unfortunately, is drying out, so I'm just going to play with that for a bit till I get the amount I need. There we go. Just a hint more phthalo blue. So now we're staying at a similar value, so it's not a whole lot lighter, but it's a bit more green, as you can see here. So we're just going back and forth with this. I think maybe I even overdid the green a bit, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue and white. If you happen to make your green become too green too fast, then just add a little bit more phthalo blue and white to kind of tone it back to closer to what this color was before. Okay, and now I'm just blending that up, adding more white. And I'm filling in the space in between the clouds. I don't want to leave any white space here. We want a perfectly covered canvas. Okay, so I filled up a little more space there. I'm just going back and forth. I'm using less pressure here now. There's not a lot of paint on the brush, and that's helping me to get this nice, smooth transitional blend. This area up here needs to be more blue because it's farther up in the sky, so I'm mixing in a little more blue and white. Even more white. Bring it down to the green. And gently pressing, going back and forth lightly. Not too much paint on my brush. I'll try to keep this nice transition. Okay, and now I'm just going to get the extra paint off my brush, grab some more white, work back in that area with the green, a little bit more of the green color. And you can see this is lighter in value than what we had there. So that's good, that's what we want. Just blending that up. Gonna take even more white. And here we're starting to get a little bit more sporadic with the amount of sky we're seeing. We're tending to see more cloud than sky here. Let's do even more white and just a teensy little bit of cad yellow light. That's really pretty. I love this transition. Okay, even more white. It's going back and forth here, trying to fill in these little spaces in between the clouds where we see just a little bit of sky. It's pretty light down here where we do see sky. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So we're gonna let that be now, and I'm just gonna keep using this brush for now since I'm gonna start with the clouds up here. I do wanna get the extra paint off my brush though, so I'm just gonna take that in the napkin and just get the extra paint off. You don't have to totally wash it down or anything. Now I'm gonna take some ultramarine blue with just a little tiny bit of phthalo blue, some raw sienna, and some of our violet color. And you should get something like this blue that's different from this blue. It's more of a gray blue. We're gonna mix some white in there. And I'm gonna put some paint down. Let's see how we like that. I think it's pretty close to what I'm looking for. I'm just gonna go with a hint more violet and a hint more phthalo blue, just to build the saturation a bit more. And then we're just gonna take this brush. This background sky color is like tacky dry. It's not like perfectly dry, and it's not a huge deal for this because we're just kind of gonna dry brush onto here anyway. We don't want it to be super wet, so if your sky is still really wet, I would wait before we add this color. So I'm just starting with these shadow colors. I don't have a whole lot of paint on this brush. Like, it's not super saturated, and I'm really gently pressing here. So really gently pressing where it's meeting with the sky. Just lightly pressing and lifting. And that's giving me that soft cloud look. I'm doing like little swirling motions and kind of lifting the brush up halfway. That's giving me more of that nice puffy cloud look, barely touching the canvas. Okay, that's that dark spot there. I'm gonna take a little bit more of that light, of that phthalo blue, just kind of mix it in there. So now I get a color that's in between these two. And I want this to go at the base of this cloud here. And I'm really, really gently pressing at the edges here. Very gently. Take a little bit more of that darker color, build up shadow, a little bit more ultramarine. Build that up in the cloud there. Okay, so I got the shadows for this cloud. Now is the trickier part. So follow along closely here if you can. We're going to take some more white. Starting a new little blob here. So this is still kind of a shadowy color. I'm going to start mixing in some of that flesh ochre, apricot type color. And I'm liking how that's looking. Now I'm just kind of building this up over that shadow, and I'm really gently pressing, kind of going in those little swirling motions again. Gonna mix a little bit more purple in, a little bit of umber, raw umber. For up here, really gently pushing this paint around. All right, I mixed more of my flesh ochre and violet. And now I'm just going around, getting closer to where I had those shadows, building up the shadowy spots, trying to give some depth to the cloud. Just a little bit here. Still building up. I'm going to put a little bit here because there's kind of like a shadow in between there. And now I'm going to get the extra paint off of this brush. I'm going to switch to white with a little bit of that flesh ochre and a little bit of cad yellow light. And we're just going to start by pushing the paint around in here very lightly. If you happen to already cover this area with your paint and it's all dark, then let that paint dry, and then you can come back up and layer up. Maybe put a little bit of white down, like a layer of white first, and then you can build up this nice highlight over that. It's going to be tricky to build up the highlight if you already put a dark spot there, but it is doable. You can just kind of wait for it to dry. All right, now we're taking more of our violet color. And I just want to blend this in right here. So it's a lot of very gentle pressing, barely any force. Just letting it barely touch the canvas and just kind of softly push that paint around, getting a soft edge. All right, so look at that nice soft cloud. I'm going to add a little bit more of this purple here just to give a bit more depth to this section. Very, very gently pressing. And there's not a lot of paint on my brush. Having a lot of paint on your brush makes it harder to get that soft blend. All right, I am going to clean this brush now. So I'm just putting it in the water, swirling that around, getting the extra water off of the brush onto my napkin. Now I'm going to take a little bit more of pure white, teensy bit of that, just a teensy bit of that yellow, and a teensy bit of the Naples orange type apricot fleshy ochre color. And now I'm building up highlights. So I'm very, very gently pressing here, just getting a little bit of paint on here. And you can see like the softness is kind of gone. So we're going to come back and I'm going to show you a trick to make it look really soft again. The trick is to have barely any paint on your brush. So now that I got that down, I'm going to take the extra paint off my brush and the napkin. So there's like nothing on there really. And now we just go right at the edges. And while that paint is still wet, we're blending. And it's giving me these nice soft edges. And this one is you gotta work pretty quickly here, because if you take too long, then the paint's gonna dry and then it doesn't quite blend as nicely. So time is a factor here. And if it does start blending too much, you can just take a little bit more of your shadow colors, which sometimes can be a little tricky to rematch. And then you just kind of go back over those edges. All right, so we got that really soft cloud. I can build up more highlights later, but for now we got it down. So we're gonna let that be. I'm gonna put this brush in the water. We're pretty much done with that. And I'm gonna switch to that nice brush that has not had a nice time. It was a flat tip brush and now it's not. It's like a frayed brush now. Okay, so I just dipped the brush in the water a little bit because my paint's starting to get a little tackier on the canvas, or on the paper palette. I took a little bit more of my ultramarine, my phthalo blue, some white, do a little bit of raw umber. Okay, and then we're just gonna put this down over here, letting the brush push the paint around very gently. Make sure you cover up all of the white empty space on the canvas. Just pushing the paint around. There's not a whole lot on my brush. It got watered down like a hair, so it's even slightly translucent. And we're just making sure we don't have any super harsh edges. Okay, so we got the base of that cloud painted in. I'm gonna go and start painting in the base of a few more of these clouds. I'm gonna take a little bit more phthalo white and umber. All right, and now we're gonna get this base of this one. In general, these clouds are more in shadow on the underside and the left side. So the sun light source is coming from this direction. I guess like this direction. So I'm just putting this paint on there. I'm doing a little swirling motions to get that on there, to get a nice smooth base. Some back and forth motions, just to soften up the edges. When you're putting this paint down, you really want to get the soft edges down as quickly as you can, so you don't get stuck with choppy edges and then you have to go back and try to remix the color to blend it. Take a little bit more phthalo blue. It's a little darker shadows in here. Again, no harsh lines, no harsh edges. Everything's very soft. I'm barely putting any pressure down on the canvas. It's just softly blending on there. If you're having a hard time getting this soft blend, there are a lot of factors that go into it, but a big thing to check on is the quality of your brushes and the quality of your paint. If you have like really cheap, like 50-cent tubes of paint from Michael's, that like really watered down paint, that's probably gonna give you streaks and it's not gonna look as nice as these paints that are heavy bodied, which means they're thicker consistency, and they have stronger pigmentation. Look how nice and soft that is. So I'm just looking around, making sure I don't have any spots where there's like a harsh line where the cloud meets the sky. That looks good. And you can also, add a little bit of variation between the shadow color of each cloud. So I'll mix in just a teensy bit more of my Sienna here. A little bit more white. And this will give me a different, slightly different shadow color. So not all the clouds are the exact same color for their shadow. That helps to separate the clouds as well. Barely any pressure here. And then, so what I just did is I took the extra paint off my brush because it seemed like I was getting kind of choppier, harsher lines here, and I had too much paint on the brush. And now I'm just going back with my dry brushing, so took the extra paint off the brush, and we're just going over what I had down there and blending it into the sky. Little swirling motions. Okay, I like that. Okay, I'm going to come down to this one. Do a little bit more phthalo, a little bit more purple in this one. Just a tiny bit. It's just really subtle variations. Or if you like more of like the impressionist style, you could go for bolder colors if you'd like. I'm doing more realism style here. And another way to approach this is you could have started with the clouds farthest in the background and make your way to the foreground. That's another way to do it. For this particular scene though, it does work either way. Sometimes you gotta work with the clouds in the background first because the clouds over top of it are like layered in an interesting way. But for this particular scene, that's not a huge deal. So I just mixed a little bit more purple and raw sienna in there. Let's do more white. Mix a little bit of that color. It's just a nice transition shadow color. Little swirling back and forth motions. And do a little bit more up there too. Just take a little more white. So I'm working on this general cluster of clouds because they have similar values and colors. Then as we move farther back, I'll do another cluster of clouds. A little bit more purple. Again, make sure as you're painting here that you're not seeing any harsh lines between shadows and highlights, cloud and sky. You just want to keep building up that texture and depth. All right, those are looking good. I'm going to take a little bit more of this like purplish color and just add a few little softer puffs of cloud at the tops. Some of these spots here. Lots of back and forth swirling motions. Keeping a nice puffy cloud look. Hopefully at this point you're not too overly frustrated with painting clouds. If you're seeing what I'm putting down and what you're painting does not look like what I'm painting, clouds are really hard, so give yourself some grace because it takes a lot of time to learn this. And the most important thing with the clouds, I mean, there's a lot of important things to make them look accurate, but in my opinion, the thing that people struggle with the most is the amount of paint they have on their brush and the amount of pressure they're using. And that is what makes the clouds not look puffy. So just by, and I can't really like show you without holding your hand for how much pressure to use. So it's something that you really have to do trial and error with. But just not having a whole lot of pressure, as I keep saying, is really important in getting these clouds to look nice and light and airy and puffy like this. I'll take a little bit more purple, and I just want to build up a little bit more of a pretty color in there. I'm going to add another little puff over here, kind of coming off this one. Just little swirling patterns and back and forth to try to push it around a bit. Really gently getting that on there, taking my time, being patient with it. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to take that brush and I'm going to clean it off. And we're going to go back to our nice highlight colors. So we're going to take white with that tiny, tiny bit of cadmium yellow light and a tiny bit of that flesh ochre color, and build up our nice highlights. So I'm putting more paint down for now just to get good coverage. Make sure it's not like too translucent. Look how pretty. And then get a little bit more of that Naples orange flesh ochre color. I'm just building up the highlights in there. All right, I'm building up another highlight down here. This one's going to be a little bit cooler, so I'm taking more just white, kind of whatever else was on the brush there. And then over here we got a little bit, and another little highlight over here. Okay, I'm going to take the extra paint off my brush and now go back and work in all these areas, making sure I don't have any harsh lines. I want to have nice smooth transitions, and I can take a little bit more of that purple and white with a tiny bit of umber and just kind of put that dry brushed in some spots here to help transition it from highlight to shadow. I think I have a little too harsh of a highlight there, so I'm going to kind of dull that down a bit. Take a little bit more of my blue and purple and sienna and just put that under there. Just blending out. All right. And I'm going to add a little bit more phthalo. I want these two to just be separated a little bit more. A little too dark. So I'm just separating these two clouds, adding that shadow, and then coming back in with the highlight. So here I'm just kind of fussing around with it. You guys don't have to do this if you are happy with how yours is looking there. All right, I like that better. And next, I do want to touch up this one little highlight. Take in more of my Naples. There we go. Okay, gonna put a little bit more of that transition over here. I think this is looking pretty good over here. Maybe just a little more. Very softly pressing here, letting that blend. And a little bit more here. I want this highlight to kind of cover up those darker areas that I put down. And more white. With a tiny bit of yellow. this nice highlight on here. So I put that paint down and then I'm really softly going around the edges, trying to get that nice puffy cloud look. Going back with a little bit more ultramarine. Can build up a bit of a shadow in here. Don't want to have any super harsh lines. Okay, and then get a little bit of a transition going down there. All right, I like this. This is looking good. And sometimes it's hard to put the brush down because you just keep seeing things. You're like, oh, I could keep fiddling with that. We'll make it look nicer. But yeah, you can do this for a long time. And it'll just keep evolving. So that's looking good for now. Next, I want to go to these clouds down here. So now our shadows are even lighter in value because they're farther away. So I mixed white with my ultramarine and my phthalo. And they're also starting to get like a hint more on the phthalo blue side as they're getting farther away from us. Mixing in a little bit more burnt sienna there, or raw sienna. And let's see, how's that look? I like that. Okay, so you can see this is more of a warmer, like phthalo blue than these shadows here. But it's still darker in value than the sky behind it. I can even make it a little bit lighter. And we're just going to do the same thing we did with the other clouds. Start with the base, soften up the edges. Make sure you're covering up all that white space on the canvas. And things start to speed up a bit more here as we're going farther into the background. The details are a little bit less important. This is more like an atmosphere part of the painting, not really the focal point. Not that we have too much of a focal point here with just some clouds, but the ones in the distance tend to be less focused on by the viewer. Okay, I got these nice cluster of clouds in here. I can mix a little bit more phthalo in with my ultramarine just to build up a shadow in a couple of these. Looks good. I'm going to take more white, a little bit of purple, a little bit more of that raw sienna, and just start to, well, even more white. Start to build up a little bit of depth there on these clouds. In some spots, you don't want to completely cover everything. We're just putting some spots there. Okay, and then a little bit more purple on the left side. Okay, and then we go with our highlights. And the highlights also aren't quite as bright here because they're farther away and we're not getting as harsh contrast between light and dark values. So I just mixed in a little bit of that flesh ochre color with our white and just like a teensy bit of purple. That's pretty close. I think I want it just a little lighter. Okay, so I'm putting this color down. Maybe even just a teensy bit more of that yellow. And a teensy bit of ultramarine. That'll help to kind of neutralize that warmth. Okay, again, gently pressing, just getting some color on there. Doing little swirly patterns with the brush. And I'm taking a little more white, and I can build up the white in a couple little spots where I want to, but we don't have to go too extreme with the highlights here because they're just a little bit of highlights this far back. Okay, that looks good. And now as we're moving closer to that horizon line, I'm gonna, yeah, let's keep using this brush. If you want, you could switch to this smaller flat tip brush if you want to try to get more detail in down here. I'm just gonna, for time's sake, keep things looser and keep working with the same brush and not go too crazy with details because you guys you get the idea, I think. All right, so now we mixed phthalo blue with white, and we're gonna mix in some violet, some umber, and that gives us this like brownish blue. Mix in even more white, and we want this value to be darker than the sky, obviously. We're gonna mix in more white, but it's not that much darker, so I'm gonna keep mixing in more white here. That is much closer to what I'm looking for. So it always helps to put just a little dab down on the canvas and see how it looks in comparison to what else you have down on the canvas. And then if something looks too dark or like there's too much contrast, then you can always go back to your palette, blend in more white or whatever other colors you need, and brighten it up, neutralize it, do whatever you need to do, and then put it back down on the canvas. Just cover up the spot you put down before. All right, so there's that. I'm going to take more white and a little bit of violet for this area really close to the horizon line. It becomes like a hazy purple color, like really far out there. And I'm just quickly putting a couple little brush strokes in there so it's not too obvious. Just a couple little changes there. Okay, and then we got that section filled in. Now we're just going to fill in the base of these last few clouds that we had visible. Going around in circles with the brush, filling in all that space. Just taking the extra paint off the brush, and then we're going to take some more white, a little bit of Naples orange color, flesh ochre color. Maybe a little bit of purple. That was too much purple. It's a itty tiny bit of phthalo blue. I want it to be lighter, but not too light once this far in the distance. Okay, we got good coverage there. And now I'm just kind of starting some new little blobs, kind of just making it seem like we've got some clouds and some spots. Again, keep things soft. Don't let yourself have any super harsh lines. And I'm just taking that nice lighter color and starting to make it seem like we've got a few little highlights implied down here, but you can't really see where one cloud ends and another cloud begins. It just kind of transitions into this field of clouds. looks nice. We can play around with this a little bit more too if you want to add a bit more definition. I don't want to go too crazy with the details back here, but I do want to just get a little bit more definition from some of these shadows. And we'll build up a little bit more highlight. All right, it looks pretty good, guys. Now, I'm just going to do that horizon line. So for the horizon line, if you care to do that, we're just going to take some phthalo green. Like I said, mine is drying out. Unfortunately, I got to get a new one. So I mixed some water in there. And we also have some phthalo blue. And we're going to have some violets. We're going to have some umber and some white. Let's do more umber and violet. And a little bit more green. And white. So this far in the distance, it's like this neutral kind of greenish blue, purple, brown, violet color. Mix a little bit of that Naples in there too, just to lighten that up. And I'm just going to take my angled brush and just go back and forth right over here where I want to have my horizon line. If you dip your brush in the water a little bit, that sometimes helps you to get a nice, more refined line. And you just go back and forth over here. Sometimes painting a straight line is the hardest part. And if you have a piece of tape and you prefer to use a piece of tape, you can put a piece of tape down, like masking tape, and that'll get you a nice straight line. Okay, so I'm just covering up this whole bottom area. Once I get that line to a point, that makes me okay with it. And we're going to mix in more of our green. And some of that Naples orange color. Flesh ochre, whatever the color is. It's going back and forth. I'll take some more white. And just keeping these back and forth brush strokes with this angled brush. It's getting me that kind of ripply water look. And that's that, guys. That is our finished painting. So I hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial for painting mid-morning, early morning to mid-morning fluffy clouds. The next painting tutorial will be another cloud painting tutorial. It's going to be a different type of cloud. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on more cloud tutorials like this one. Alright guys, that wraps up this painting tutorial on how to paint clouds, part 1. Make sure you check back next week to see another cloud painting tutorial I have coming your way. Have a great day and happy painting. Bye-bye.